out today. Now, at the beginning of every miner shift in the late 1800s, they were issued 3 candles like you see here, or like you see on this guy's hat right here. They would step onto the skip, go down to whatever level they were working on, step off the skip, they would light that candle, walk to where they were working for the day, and then they'd blow the candle out. Try to imagine 8 hours a day, every single day of this. This is what it was like for the miners back then. Wow. They had to conserve their candles for obvious reasons. They only got 3 of them, but if they had anything left at the end of the day, they would take it home to their wives so they could sew or do dishes or what they needed to do at night. Now, before we had electric power tools and steam power tools, the way the miners would work their way through this rock was literally by hand. They were issued a striker and a set of different size shakers, and these poor guys would sit down here for 8 hours a day beating on this rock in the dark. Every time they hit the shaker, they would have to turn it like so. And that would create that perfectly bored out hole for the dynamite to go into. This is called single jacking. They also had double jacking like you see here. The guy on top has a huge sledgehammer. He's hitting that shaker tool over the guy's shoulder on the bottom. Every time he hits it, he's got to turn it to make room for that dynamite.
And they did that in the dark.
These guys, for obvious reasons, needed lighting. They were issued extra candles and they had access to lanterns. But the problem was, that still wasn't enough lighting. In the early days of mining up here in the late 1800s, this is where most of the accidents would happen. If you can't see anything, you're guaranteed to make a mistake. Now, from the candles, we did eventually graduate over to these. These are called carbide lanterns. Carbide is a white granular substance that you put in the bottom reservoir here. In the top reservoir, you put water. That water drips down onto the carbide, and it produces a gas that comes out of here called acetylene. When you light that, it burns a really nice bright white light. The miners fell in love with these things when they came out with them. These were originally invented in France as bicycle lanterns. They would hang them from the front of their bicycles. The miners found out about them and started using them. Wow. Now, we also had the smaller versions of the large carbides. You would attach these to your baseball caps or to your hard hats when they finally came out with those. And the miners, with an absolute passion, hated these things. You have a 2-inch flame shooting out of your forehead. What could possibly go wrong? Every time you look up fast, that flame could wrap around and burn off your eyebrows. If you were ever in one of the 50 saloons in town, just in Cripple Creek, and you saw a guy with no eyebrows, you knew he was brand new to the district and he had no idea what he was doing. He was called a tenderfoot. In fact, if you look close, mine are just now starting to grow. Come on down this way. Come on. Blew the dynamite. What came out of the mountain was this stuff behind me. All that dirt back there and all those rocks. And that's called muck. This guy's job title is he's a mucker. And he's got to fill 1.5 of these ore carts up every hour by hand. If he couldn't do that, he was immediately fired. In fact, there were people on the surface hoping this guy would mess up so they could have his job. Now, this tour has been expanded. We've blown all this out over the years to make room for the tour. It used to come down just above a donkey's ears. So if you're 6'1" like I am, or this unusually large gentleman,
my dad,
you would be in a lot of pain being stooped over for 8 hours. You probably couldn't handle it. Now, we had a guy from Victor, which is a town 7 miles from here, and this guy worked in a lot of the different mines here in the district, and he was fired from every single one of those mines because he couldn't do it. He was just too tall and it just hurt too much. Years later, the same guy ended up becoming the world heavyweight boxing champion, Jack Dempsey. And they called him Kid Blackie. This guy could throw punches, but he couldn't throw muck, apparently. If you folks want to come in and stand right over in this area, you can do that. Now, around the turn of the century, we started coming out with machines like this yellow thing you see here. That's called a 12B mucking machine. And this was originally steam powered when they came out with it. And what used to take what seemed like forever to do by hand over here, we can now do in a couple minutes on this machine. We have since converted this over to pneumatic or air powered, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you guys here shortly. I'm going to demonstrate a lot of different tools along the way. And when I do, it can get pretty loud. So if you guys want to plug your ears while I'm running this, you can do that, okay? If I could get you, ma'am, if you wouldn't mind standing right over here for me. I have to put this chain up real quick. This chain right here should give you folks a false sense of security. Come on back up to the chain, that way you can see a little bit better, and I'll turn the air on this and demonstrate.
I think you guys are a good team no matter what, so.
All right, here we go. Plug them up. What? What? Imagine being on something like this for 8 hours a day, nonstop, in an enclosed area like this. Eventually, you're going to start losing your hearing pretty quick. The old timers, when they came out with cigarette butts on cigarettes, they would rip those off and put them in their ears. But before that, they would just stick cotton in their ears, and that really didn't help much at all. Now that corridor you've been walking through so far, that's called a crosscut. That would start at the shaft. We would start blasting our way away from the shaft looking for those veins of gold. Once we found a vein of gold, whatever direction that went, that's the direction we would start blasting. And that's called a drift. And we'll be walking through one here shortly, and you'll see just how far that drift went where they were chasing that vein of gold. It just goes on forever and ever. Once they were done with that, they started looking for gold elsewhere. Any questions so far?
When they were blasting, how far away would they be able to get?
I'll show you that here shortly. My boss told me I could do whatever I want on my last day here, so I'll actually let you watch your steps over. Now around the 1920s, they started coming out with drills like this thing here. This is called the column drill, and it's a two-man operation. One miner would drill a 2 foot, then a 4 foot, and lastly a 6 foot bit into the wall. When he was done with that hole, his buddy had to help him move this up or down or to the left or right to start another hole. And I'm gonna demonstrate this for you folks. And everything down here is not quiet. Here we go. Now, once I have a series of holes drilled, I will have what's called a blast round. This is where the dynamite goes in. Each one of these holes has 6 sticks of dynamite in them, with the exception of this one here in the middle. That would be empty. That's called a reliever hole. When the dynamite around that hole blasts, it'll fracture that rock and kind of force it into this middle hole, loosening everything up for us. The very last sticks to blow are the ones on the bottom, and these are called kickers. When those go off, they'll force that muck across the ceiling into a pile right about here. That's where that mucker comes in and starts shoveling. Now, if there's a stick of dynamite left in the wall that has not blown, we'll send the new guy down here, give him one of these, and he's got to reach back in there and fish that unexploded dynamite out by hand. Now, this rock you see here all around us, this is called Rocky Mountain granite. We're drilling into a huge boulder. We don't have any structural support here like they need on the East Coast, because we don't have cave-ins down here. But if I were to take this piece of metal and scrape it up hard enough against this rock in that hole, I could produce a spark. And if I did that, I could blow myself up very easily. Now, dynamite will start to freeze at around 52 degrees. It's a constant 50 degrees down here all year long. So once these holes are drilled, I would have to run those sticks of dynamite down, throw them into the hole, and hope they all blast before they start freezing. If there's a stick left in there, that's probably because it started freezing and it's a dud. They did that for many years until somebody invented this thing. And the guy who invented this had mental issues, I think. This is called a dynamite warmer. You stick your dynamite in these holes, you place this thing right next to the wood burning or coal burning stove on the surface, and you wait for it to get up to temperature. Now when you run it down and throw it in the holes, chances of all of it exploding are pretty great because they're warm enough. I would not want to be around this thing while it was up there warming up next to the stove. That's insane to me. I'll explain that here shortly.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, you're good. Now this drill here we still use today. This is called a jackleg drill. This was invented in the 1940s. This little silver part is pneumatic, so I can stand here and push a button and make this thing go up and down. I can drill a 6-foot hole by myself today in about 2 minutes or so. Back when they were single jacking and double jacking, they could only go 6 feet a day. So imagine how long it took just to get to where we're at now. It took years and years and years to get down here. Now today, once I have these holes ready for the explosives, we don't use large sticks of dynamite anymore. We'll use what's inside this bag right here, or what's inside this jar. It's called ANFO. ANFO is a mixture of diesel fuel and fertilizer. In fact, it's the same stuff that Timothy McVeigh used in Oklahoma City. I'll spray it into those holes. Once the hole is full, I'll cap it off with what's called a primer plug, a smaller stick of dynamite. And once I blast today, I can keep going and going and going all day long. All I have to do is wait for the dust to settle before I can start drilling again. Now what you're about to hear is not loud, but this is what it would have sounded like in the late 1800s when I'm blasting that dynamite. I would light the fuse, I would run down to the shaft and count each explosion as it's happening. If I didn't count those correctly, I could potentially be putting somebody's life in danger. So let's see how good you guys are. Let's see if you can count them all. Give this a couple seconds. We're old school here. We're still using a Walkman. Here we go. How many?
10.
11.
Go 12.
I counted 10.
No? No? No, there were 23 explosions. You're all fired. Let's concentrate just on this one hole here. That hole has 6 sticks of dynamite in it. When the first stick of dynamite explodes, within milliseconds, the one behind it goes off, and so on and so forth. So what you guys were counting as one explosion was actually several in a row. There's a very specific way they teach you how to count that, and I can't do it, and that's why I'm a tour guide. I would never attempt that in 2 minutes. Come on down this way.
Need to go in the middle.
Right, we'll line up right in through here. There you go. Right there's perfect. Your bathtub, some folks use it as a laxative. We have so much of it here in the district that if we were to harvest just the salt, we would make a big profit just off of that. Unfortunately, in some spots throughout the district, we also have something called cinnabar that leaches out with it. Cinnabar is mercury. If you're in a bathtub and that mercury gets inside of you, it's really toxic. It can hurt you pretty bad. So unfortunately, right now, all we can do is just leave it here. Now, you guys can touch it, just don't lick the walls, okay? It does not taste like snozberries, I promise you guys. Come on down this way. Go ahead and look at this area. Keep scooting in here. Who is this? Is that everybody? I hope so. Now, approximately 35 million years ago, give or take a week, there used to be a volcano right where we're at now. That volcano was about the size of Pikes Peak. When that volcano blew, all the different minerals and metals that were deep within the earth were forced to the surface with the magma. When that magma cooled and solidified, it created the gold veins we're looking for in the district here today. Now, if you guys have ever watched any of the gold hunting shows and stuff like that, when you think about gold veins, you can see the gold in the wall and that's what you're going after, but not here. What we're looking for here is that purple streak. That right there is a gold vein. The purple itself is called fluorite. Fluorite itself is virtually worthless, but that's what the gold is going to be hiding inside. That gold is going to be microscopic all through that fluorite vein. Once we get enough of this to the surface, we'll begin to process it. There's a couple different ways we can extract the gold out of it at that point. One is a chemical process where we use cyanide and a whole bunch of stuff you never want to mess with unless you know what you're doing. The other is to do what I personally do. I'll take this and crush it down into a powder. I'll stick it into what's called a kiln. I'm sure some of you might know, you just make pottery. I'll get that up to about 1800 degrees for an hour or so. During that time, that gold will liquefy and kind of bubble together into certain clumps. Once I get it out of the kiln, I'll pan it out and then further process it from there. But those are two of the ways we get the gold out of the rock up here in the district. Now, if you look up directly above my head, you'll see that plank of wood up there. The miners would stand on that plank of wood for 8 hours a day drilling straight up. They would pack those holes full of dynamite, blow the dynamite, and all that muck would fall down to a level like this, or like this. And that's where this machine comes in, called a slusher. That slusher would drag that bucket, that slusher bucket, across the ground, bringing that gold ore with it. It would drop it down these ore chutes to the level below us, into these ore carts, and from there we had donkeys, and the donkeys would drag those carts back to the shaft for us. And I'll talk more about the donkeys later. Right now, I'm going to demonstrate the slusher for you. What we're looking at is that bucket right there to see how it works. And you guys can stand right over in this area here if everybody wants to come over. These two guys right here are the only smart ones. Everything's loud down here. Plug them up. Here we go. Kind of shows you how that works. It would drag that ore across the ground to the ore chute. You want to be a miner when you grow up? He decided to tour the district here to see what all the talk was about. People were becoming millionaires overnight here in the district. He came down into the mines and saw that we were using those donkeys. The donkeys were born underground, they lived their whole lives underground, and they died underground. Most of them were blind because they were never introduced to any other lighting except candlelight every once in a while. So he made it a law to where we had to take the donkeys to the surface for 2 hours every day so they could graze and get sunshine and whatever else they needed. The problem was getting a donkey onto what we came down in and then keeping it calm as it's going up and down. Most of the time, these donkeys would thrash around and injure themselves. The miners did this for a very, very short time. They finally got fed up with it, took the donkeys to the surface and just let them go. If you guys leave here and go into Cripple Creek, I encourage you to drive around for a little while. You'll find a herd of donkeys that are just free roaming. You can get out and take your picture with
We
them and
tried
pet
to
them.
find one.
Did you? Couldn't find any?
We found them.
We did.
We had an
Did you?
apple that we were gonna feed it.
Yeah, you never know where they're gonna be.
We
But-
found a brass ass.
The owner is a donkey, so yes. But 2 or 3 of those donkeys out of that herd are the original descendants of the donkeys that worked in the mines here. And those guys are taken care of better than any person I've ever met. They are like a national staple. Now, once we got rid of the donkeys, we had to push these ore carts by hand all the way back to the shaft. Now, it doesn't seem like far from here, but if you're 1.5 miles back that way, and that's your job for 8 hours a day, you're not gonna last very long doing that. They did this for several years until Mollie Kathleen's son, Perry, invented one of these. This is called a Perry tram, or an air donkey. We'll fill this up with air, hit a little button in the back, and now we can push and pull multiple carts all the way back to the shaft, and we don't have to do it by hand anymore. Now, does anybody know what these things sticking out of the ceiling are called?
Stalagmites.
Stalactites. In other parts of the world, these take millions and millions of years to grow, just to get that long. Not here. We have so much water trapped in these rocks that when it finds its way through the different cracks and crevices, it'll bring with it whatever mineral or element is in its path. Once it hits oxygen, it'll start to solidify like this one here. Now, if you look at that brown or black one, there's a couple of them here. That's oxidized iron. That's rust. Does anybody know what the green stuff on the walls is?
Copper?
Copper, oxidized copper. We have gold, silver, platinum, turquoise, boulder opals. We have all this stuff stuck in the rocks down here, and we want to go after it. And we probably still could if somebody wouldn't have invited a bunch of geologists up here. The geologists say that only 8% of the gold has been found here in the district up to date. That 8% at today's prices is worth trillions of dollars. If we were to get in there and get the rest of it out, we could pay off our national debt and still have money left over. That's how much money is left up here, how much gold. Now, if we were to get it all out at one time, what do you think would happen to the price of gold?
Crash.
It wouldn't be worth anything. So the government comes out with certain rules and regulations preventing most people from mining up here. If you have millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to begin with, that's what it would cost just to fill out the paperwork and the permits to start mining. And then you better hope there's gold there, because you're not getting that money back. So a lot of people don't want to take that risk. Now, I am a 4th generation miner. I started mining when I was 8 years old with my dad and my grandfather, and I was grandfathered in. So I'm allowed to mine the district. In fact, I own a couple turquoise mines north of Cripple Creek that I mine out every single day after work. But anybody else that were to come into town and want to start mining, they couldn't do it unless they had backers or if they had millions of dollars already. Now, this tool here helped kill more miners than anything else down here. This is called a wiggle tail stopper drill. These miners would stand on that plank of wood for 8 hours a day doing this. While they're doing that, this would jackhammer straight up and down. It wouldn't turn. Now, the tool itself didn't kill these miners. It was all that dust coming down that they were breathing in. We have silica in these rocks. Silica is glass. If you breathe that in dust form, it attaches to your lungs. Every time you cough, you're ripping your lungs apart. During this era, most of the miners didn't live past 35 years old. They thought it was some kind of flu or virus or something. They had no idea what was killing them. And once they figured out what was killing them, they started putting holes down the middle of bits like this. Now we can use this with this tank right here called a jack tank, which would be full of water. As we're drilling, that water's squirting out of the end of this, and it's essentially turning that dust into mud, and we're not breathing it in anymore. I would rather be cold and wet than dead. Now this is the newer version of the old stopper drill, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you. And in my opinion, this could be the loudest one on the tour, so if you're going to plug your ears, this is the one to do it on. Here we go. Probably feel that in your chest more than anything. Once I have a series of holes drilled, I'll pack them full of dynamite, blow the dynamite, and then that slusher would come through and clean it out for us. Now, does anybody have any ideas why they were drilling up towards the surface rather than down on top of the ore?
Maybe because there's more gold up there.
No, that's not it. Gravity. When you detonate that, all that rock falls down, it's easier to clean up rather than going on top of it. It's a lot more work. So what they would initially do is walk the surface, find outcroppings of rocks. They would have those rocks tested to see if there was any gold in them. If there was, they would sink a shaft right next to where they found that gold, go down 200 feet, up underneath it, and then straight up. Once that vein is depleted, they would go back to the shaft, go down another 200 feet, and just continue that process. That's why we're down this far right now. Now, they still use these things in some third world countries like Kenya, parts of the Middle East, and Arkansas. Walking through so far is the Mollie Kathleen gold mine. It's actually not. We have been walking through a series of different mines to get to where we're at now. During its heyday up here, there were over 500 active mines operating at one time here in the district.
Wow.
If each one of those mines had its own mine shaft, you can imagine what the countryside on the surface would look like. It would be littered with mine shafts. It would be ugly. So what they chose to do instead is whoever owned their own shaft, like the one we came down in, they would lease the property out all around that mine shaft to different mining companies. Now where we're at now, this is called the Queen Bess mine, and this goes up 200 feet to the surface.
Oh, okay.
Now if you see that guy sitting up there, he's called a stoper rat.
Stoper rat.
His job was to sit up there for 8 hours a day and do nothing but drill. He was not allowed to come down. He had to take his lunch up there, whatever he needed for the day. Back then, he was getting paid $3 a day. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's more than doctors and lawyers make today. These guys were making an absolute fortune down here. Why else would you put your life on the line to work down here? Now, we also had children working down here, and they were 7 to 14 years old. They were called nippers. They were making 50 cents a day. If that guy needed a tool, one of the jobs of the nipper was to attach the tool to the end of this cable, and with this air tugger, he would send it up to him that way. And I'll show you another job those kids had. It was horrible, but I'll show it to you later. You'll see that stalactite there, that's that pure copper. And then all that water coming down there, that's from the outhouses on the surface. So I advise you to stay away from that. Of course, I'm kidding. Where am I?
I was wondering how they went to the bathroom way up there. I don't want to be the guy below him.
That's that guy up there. No, this is actually runoff from last year's snow. And this will run all year long, and then next year it'll just start all over. This never stops running. It actually runs down here and then goes to the level below us from there.
So if they had to use the bathroom, just.
I'll show you in a minute.
That's when that brown stuff dripping down.
Could be, but no, we had a more crude device, and I'll show you a little bit later. We're gonna take a ride on an air tram. So if you guys wanna come. Well, I hope that back there answered your question. What they would do is blow a hole in the wall, put a crude makeshift door over it, and that would be their bathrooms. Now, if you see those empty dynamite boxes, or that one empty dynamite box up there on that bench, they would take those and they would convert those into what's called a honey pot, or the toilets. What do you think the nipper's job was at the end of the day? You have to take those to the surface and clean them out. We're hiring. It's a crappy job.
Somebody has to do it.
That's right. Come on, Jeff.
No, I think the kid says it works.
Now, when gold was discovered here in 1890, the price of gold was only $20.67 an ounce. And it didn't really fluctuate much until the 1960s. In the 1960s, we had one processing plant left in the district. We used to have hundreds of them. And it shut down, and that pretty much shut down everything up here in the district. Most of the people stopped mining in the 1960s. The tour would have went right through here, through that crosscut, back to the shaft, and that would have been the end of the tour. The mid-60s, however, we decided to expand the tour a little bit, so we started blasting through here. Now imagine, it's the late 1800s, you're a miner, and you're walking past this very spot every day, not knowing that 10 to 15 feet from where you were walking every day was a huge gold vein. When they discovered that, it made worldwide news. Cripple Creek discovers gold again. The reason it's still there is because of the price of gold, it just wasn't worth going after. Now, when they assayed that in the 1970s, it came back at 6 to 12 ounces of gold per ton. At today's prices, if I were to process 1 ton of ore and get a dime-sized piece of gold out of it, I'm making a profit and I want to continue. Imagine 6 to 12. It would take me 30 tons of that, which isn't a lot. At today's prices, I could buy my own island with how much gold is just sitting right there. That right there is one of the many reasons why I'm not allowed to be down here by myself. They know.
We'll help you.
In fact, all the cameras we have
Where's the
down
alley
here,
going?
there's all the cameras we have down here, that's all my fault too. I've been working here since I was 15 and a half years old, and I've been caught down here doing so much stuff, but for whatever reason, they keep hiring me back every year. I'm gonna go ahead and send this back if I can get everybody to take. See, all that purple is what we're looking for. That's that gold vein.
Ready to dig?
Us coming down.
We all do that in the nighttime, about the weekend sticks.
This is where we get free labor out of you. I like these gates up, but you guys work. Now, I could take you folks right now 1,000 feet underground, and we could walk over to the town of Victor, 7 miles from here. In fact, these crosscuts and drifts are all, they all kind of come together to form these long voyages for one reason only, and that's the air that we're breathing. The air is fresh air coming in from the town of Victor. Now, at night, when we're not here, the town of Victor can walk over here. That's why we have these gates on both sides. We lock these up, we have cameras all throughout this room. Because if we were to take these little tiny pebbles that you see here in front of you and behind you and sell them at today's prices, we'd be close to $300,000 just out of what you see here. 1 ounce of gold will fit into a teaspoon. It's not that much, but it's worth almost $2,000 an ounce. Now, they tell us it's because of the town of Victor, but I think you guys know me well enough that your middle name? It is now. Now, these mines that you see up here, these are just a handful of the mines in the district. These are the ones that we found interesting. We're not going to be in this room very long, so if you guys want to take pictures of each one of these, whenever you get home or wherever you're going after this, you can read up on them, take your time. But in the meantime, take a look around, and while you're doing that, I will continue talking to you guys.
Is that gold up there?
Yeah.
Anywhere?
No, if it was, I wouldn't tell you.
There is.
No, this room is called a VUG, V-U-G. A room like this is formed when the steam from the volcano eats away at the rock, and it leaves rooms like this. And they could be millimeters big all the way up to just miles wide. Now, we do have turquoise mines up here, not a lot, but I own 2 of those turquoise mines myself. And I have to mine those out every single day during the summer. When I leave here, I'll work that till 2 or 3 in the morning, come back and give tours and do it all throughout the summer. Because in the fall and winter months, when the barometric pressure drops, when all those storm fronts come in, it squeezes against this rock and it leaches out a gas called carbon dioxide. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, but if you get caught up in that stuff, you basically go to sleep forever. So we really don't mine that much in the winter. So whatever turquoise I get out of the ground, I'll sell off little pieces of it throughout the winter to get me through the winter, and then next summer I just start all over again. And there's nothing I would rather do. I absolutely love being a miner. I feel safer underground than I do on the surface. In fact, let me see, I don't think I have it with me, I might.
Are they worth a lot, the turquoise?
Do I get a lot?
Are they worth a lot? Like
Today it
usually-
is.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, not so much. In fact, the roads up here, when I was a kid, they were all dirt roads. And when the weather washed those roads out, they would take dirt from the turquoise mine and they would cover the roads up with it. And then every time it rained, my mom would send me out with a squirt bottle and a spoon, and I would walk up and down the streets looking for turquoise. And we would, like I said, we would do that all summer long. You know, looking back now, I think my mom just wanted me out of the house. But this is from my turquoise mine. This is after I polish it up. If you want to look at that and hand it down there, pass it down. But this is what I do when I'm not here. Now, I'm going to give each one of you a piece of the gold ore to take home with you today. Except you're way too excited. I'm kidding, you'll get a piece. I'll dig through this and find you guys some good pieces to take home with you. Now, when I hand these to you and you see shiny stuff on there, it's probably iron pyrite. Iron pyrite is fool's gold. Remember, the gold up here, for the most part, is going to be microscopic.
Have you ever found turquoise with gold in it?
Yes, actually, yes, we do. We find it often because it runs together. Turquoise is a product of copper, and then the gold will run through that copper a lot of the time. So we do find it. Here you go, put that in your pocket. That's your college fund. You're welcome, Mom and Dad. Minor Mike just paid for his schooling.
He's my champion because I said we were selling his Legos. He was not happy about that.
No, I don't want one.
I love my Legos.
There you go.
I give them up.
All right, I'll close this up real quick. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, that is cool. Check that out. If you find a rock like this, this is called leverite. You want to leave it right there because it's not worth anything. Close this up. If you guys want to follow me down this way. Oh, Jesus.
All right, guys, once you get down to that chain, go ahead and take the chain down and walk into that room for me. Good job.
You guys could walk on this. One of our sponsors is Flex Tape, and it seems to be holding up pretty good. Now, this thing that you see here, this is called a sinking bucket. The miners would drop this down to whatever level that gold ore is on. They would fill these up, bring them up to a level like this, dump them into these ore carts, and from there, those donkeys would take it all the way back to the shaft for us. I'm going to demonstrate how this works for you guys. This one is not very loud, but it is cool to see how everything kind of works together to dump this ore out. So if you're taking pictures of it or video, this is one of the cool ones to do. If I could get you folks just to step back a little bit, you'll understand why here shortly. Keep going right. I would rather do this for 8 hours a day than anything else down here, being in charge of that thing. Now, before they invented this piece of metal right here called an apron, the thing that catches the bucket, 2 miners would have to wait here for this to come up. This wouldn't be here, it would just be a hole in the ground. And these guys would have to grab this and pull it off to the side and then wrestle with it to get that ore out of there. And this is where a lot of the miners would slip and fall to their deaths. It was very dangerous. When the guy who invented that came out with the apron, he saved hundreds of miners' lives. The problem was, he never put a patent on his invention, so everybody stole his idea. If he would have put a patent on it, he would have become an overnight millionaire here in the district. Instead, he probably worked the rest of his life working down here as a miner. Come on through, and I'm kidding, you can step on this. Watch your steps over these rails.
You're 1,000 feet.
Come on in, we'll squeeze everybody in here. Now, right before we came down into the ground, did anybody see that young lady on the surface pulling on that rope? What she was doing is sending a set of signals back to the hoistman, the guy who's in charge of that skip. It's kind of like Morse code. There's no other way to communicate with the guy up there. You can't use radios down here because it won't reach up. What she ran was 2532. 25 means we want to come to the 10th level where we're at now. 3 means we have men on board, be careful and run us slow. And then 2 means to lower us into the ground. Once I get us all onto those skips, I will ring 3-1. 3 means men on board, and 1 means to hoist us out of the ground. Now, there's a couple different ways you can decipher what I'm trying to tell them. One is a bell like you see here, but a lot of these guys were losing their hearing pretty quick working on this equipment. The other would have been a light that flashes every time I pull on this. So I will demonstrate 3-1 to you guys. This is what he would hear and see up there in the hoist house. Here we go. When he hears that, he knows to pull us out of the ground. We're ready to come out. Now, before I get us all back onto those skips, does anybody have any questions for me?
Where's the gold?
What's that? Where's the gold? It's all around us.
You want to sell any of that turquoise in your pocket?
No, what I do is I'll stockpile it till fall, and then I'll sell off little pieces of it to get me through the winter. So I need to hang on to every little bit I can. I usually take it down to Gallup, New Mexico, and the Native Americans down there will buy it from me and make jewelry and stuff out of it. So, any other questions?
Do they run big fans down here to?
Not anymore. They initially did that when they first started mining. That would suck the fresh air out of the shaft and blow it down these yellow tubes down to where the miners were working. But once all these crosscuts and drifts were all connected to each other, that pretty much became obsolete up here. They still use it in some parts of the world, but not here anymore.
So the vertical runs are, you might say, like the Mollie Kathleen is like one of the vertical runs.
Mollie Kathleen, yes.
Yeah, Mollie Kathleen.
Yeah, one of the vertical.
But this is kind of like a communal shafting
It is.
down here.
Yeah, what would happen is, I don't know if we have any other, yeah, there's a piece of wood sticking out of the ceiling there. There would be one there, and then usually there's one there. You can barely see it. So that right there is kind of the property marker, the boundary. So if I'm working this mine out, I can work all of this all the way down as far as I want. But the second I step across that and start mining that, I'm working on somebody else's property. That's called high grading. I'm stealing somebody else's gold. So that, if you got caught doing that, it was usually not a very good outcome. So everybody that was on the very top skip, the one that went straight up in the air before we came down, I will load you guys up first. It's going to take me a couple seconds to drop this. So if you guys want to take your pictures in front of this 1,000-foot sign, I'm sure somebody can help you take those pictures. Just watch that hole right there. It goes down a little bit there.
Come on, Jaden.
Come on, Tiger.
Jaden, Dana.